it's a new year. It's 2025, and you will notice this guy on my right. You've seen him before. This is Saint Murad. Saint Murad is back even better than before because finally now his tome, his masterpiece, the work that he's been working on for years, has finally come to fruition, and we want to introduce it today. We want to make sure that you get a hold of it. So I've brought Murad over here from the Middle East. He is quite a few hours ahead of me, so I'm looking towards my future there. But he's going to introduce this, what we're calling the sinless Qur'an translation. Now, that's a play on words. You're going to see why when we get to it. He'll explain it. And I don't want to waste any more of his time. He'll show you how you can get it, and of course, what you can do with it, and why this is unique. It's the only one of its kind. It's the only Quranic translation that does what it does, and you're going to see what that is as he unpacks it for you. And of course, I'm going to get my copy as well. So, God bless you. Great to have you back again, Murad. Happy New Year. Though we're almost approaching in fact, we're in February now. But tell me, what is this all about? And help me to know where we're going to go with it.
Hello, Dr. J. It's great to be with you. And this is the first ever Quran translation which never used any of the standard Islamic narrative material. So I never looked at any exegesis, any hadith, any stories related to Muhammad, any biography, nothing. I just worked with the Quran, with its bare text, and looking at the word in every single context so that I try and understand what the author or authors are trying to convey. And this is something that no one has ever done before. Whenever they want to understand a verse, they just go straight to Al-Tabari or Bukhari or these people, and they don't assume that this stuff is just has a basic linguistic meaning that has been lost with years as the years went on. You see?
That's it. And I hope you've all picked that up. A good historian, a good theologian, or a good philosopher, anybody that goes back to the past to bring material from the past, whenever you read what that person in the past has written, you go back to the time period that they wrote, and you use the idioms, you use the wordings, you use the ideas from that time period rather than your own time period. Why? Because language changes. We all know that. When you're looking at this beautiful vest that I have on here, I say, "Oh, that's a beautiful piece. That's a beautiful piece of thread." Or that looks bad. That thread looks bad. Now, today we know exactly what that meant. But if I said that 20 years ago, that thread looks bad, people thought I'm making fun of this vest. So languages change, and in order for because languages change, most people, in fact, everybody, in fact, you're right. Everybody has looked at the Quran, has interpreted the words or the phrases or the idiomatic expressions that are in within the Quran using the standard Islamic narrative to understand those words. And the standard Islamic narrative are the Islamic traditions, including the Sirah, the Hadith, the Tafsir, the Tahriq, all of these genre of literature that help Muslims to unpack the Quran. In fact, they were mostly written to unpack the Quran, to create and make sense of the Quran, but they were written much, much, much later. How much later? We're going to find out. That has yet to go up online. We have now found that this standard Islamic narrative, the Islamic traditions, don't even begin to appear until the 11th century and the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th century. That's the Ottoman period. And so, as we have been reading the Quran, the words that we're reading, the phrases, the idiomatic expressions come from mainly Ottoman period, redacted back to supposedly someone who's receiving this in the 7th century. Can you see the problem with that? We would never do that with the English language. We would never take what the way we say it today and impose on the way they said it during the Victorian era or much, much earlier. So why in the world are we doing this with Arabic? And so Murad is the first one to say, hold on a minute. Why are we doing this? Why don't we go back and exegete it properly? Exegete means to interpret it, to translate it properly. And the best way to do that is to go back to the original writers. And let's do away with those that are much later and go back to the original text. Go back to the original time. Supposedly this text was written. To go back now, as we know, none of the Quran was written in the seventh. Well, let's be careful. Some of it was actually before the seventh century. In fact, some of it can be traced all the way back to the second, third, fourth, and fifth century. But when it was actually put down, pen to paper, it was more than likely around the eighth century, possibly the ninth century. So let's go back to those century and see what the Arabic meant at that time. That's what Murad said. To me, that seems perfectly logical. Murad, go ahead. Tell us and see what you have done. Now we've explained what you've done. Go ahead and tell me what and how you did this.
Yes, and for this I will share my PowerPoint now so that I show the people exactly how I have done this work. Now, let me tell you my story because a lot of people do not know who I am. I am a native Arabic speaker from the Middle East. Arabic is my mother tongue. I have never studied in any Islamic institution, and that is a plus. That is why I am not polluted with the S.I.N propaganda, Standard Islamic Narrative propaganda. But what is the S.I.N exactly? This is the question. Well, the S.I.N, we have came to the conclusion that it is a hoax. S.I.N meaning Standard Islamic Narrative. And by that, we are talking about the exegesis of the Quran, the Hadith, which is the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, the biography of Muhammad, Asbab al-Nuzul or reasons of why the verses descended in the Quran, and the Mecca and Medina phases. All of this stuff is much too late, and it came mostly from Persians who wanted warriors to fight and die in battle. This is not what the Quranic author was intending. Now, as Dr. J, you yourself, you always say, you got the wrong man at the wrong place, doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. Also, we have Yasser Qadi. He says the S.I.N or the Standard Islamic Narrative has holes in it. So we all know, one way or another, that the S.I.N is a hoax. So we need a sinless Quran translation. We all actually have a common enemy, and that is the S.I.N. The only reason you trust the S.I.N is that you never knew that it was this bad, and you think that it has no valid alternative. But actually, the S.I.N is hiding the primitive layer of the Quran, which was suppressed mostly by the Abbasids. I told myself, never touch the S.I.N and let's translate the Quran without it. I knew I was the only one to do it.
Go back to
So
that
I,
slide. Go back to that slide.
yeah.
I don't know if you all picked up the symbolism of that picture at the top there. Can you see? That's Murad with an apple with no bite out of it. It is perfect. It has not been destroyed. It has not been contaminated. That's his symbolism. I don't think people pick that up. That's brilliant, Murad. So really what we're doing is we're going back to the original apple, the original fruit from the Garden of Eden. We're going back to that before it was destroyed, before it was contaminated. That's what you're doing. You're going back to the time, like in the Garden of Eden. You're going, even though you're not a Christian, at least you're picking up the symbolism that we all enjoy. Thanks so much. That would have been lost by most people because you went so quick. I had to stop you so that people pick that up. Well done.
So I swore an oath to deliver my people the best possible sinless Quran translation. Not just because I am very passionate about the subject, but also because they gave me so much love on YouTube and I want to give back. So here, what did other Quran translators have next to them? We have the Muslims and the non-Muslims. They had the S.I.N that makes them an orange. Now, what did I have next to me as I was translating the Quran? I had linguistics. That makes me an apple. That's why I would like to say do not compare apples to oranges. Because I used linguistics, they used the S.I.N, a totally different idea. So, for example, you have Osama Dakdok and Robert Spencer, they would say jihad means holy war. I would say jihad used to mean exert effort, but the sin turned it into holy war. So we have two layers of the onion. We have the primitive linguistic layer, which is just exert effort, and then we have holy war, and this is what came with the sin, which is late. It's as if Osama and Robert are saying gay only means homosexual. I would say no. Gay in the 50s used to mean happy, flamboyant. Now it strictly means homosexual. So this is how language evolves. You see?
And what's interesting, both Osama Dakdok and Robert Spencer are good friends of ours, and they have done a great job by actually translating and taking the words, even within the sin context, within the Standard Islamic Narrative, they've taken it back to its original S.I.N meanings from the much later centuries after the 7th century. So from the ninth, 10th, 11th, they've done that job, but they have only kept within the framework of the Standard Islamic Narrative. What they're saying to many of, and that's why they wrote their Quran, they wrote their translations, because many of the modern translators, like the word jihad, they're now saying, no, this does not mean violence. This does not mean war. It means actually an internal, a kind of a dependency on returning, getting yourself a fight within, not an outward fight. That's what and both Dak Doc and Robert Spencer have said, be careful, be careful. That is not what the authors are intending. What you're saying is, hold on a minute. All of you are incorrect. Go back and see what jihad really meant. Jihad really meant to exert. So let's take it back to its original meaning. But how do you exert? That, of course, the ramifications of how you exert, of course, is where the problems we're having today. So we're not trying to shut down Robert Spencer or Doc Doc. They're good friends. They're doing a great job. But you're going back to even further back than they're going back. They're stopping at sin and trying to unpack it from within the context when many of the traditions that translate it, interpret it, especially the tafsir, which takes what is in the Quran and tries to unpack it for the people at that time. And we know that the earliest manuscripts for the tafsir are from the 13th century. Let me repeat that, from the 13th century, from the Ottoman period. You're saying, forget the Ottoman period. Let's go right back to the 7th century. Let's see what the Arabic word for jihad meant right at the very time that it actually was introduced. And that's what every exegete should do. That is to me, that is the work of an exegete. So Murad, you are doing what most exegetes have so far, every exegete so far has not done, and every translator has not done. You're taking it back to the time period it was supposedly earliest time it was written.
Yes, exactly. And I also want to reiterate that the work of Osama and Robert is very important. It's just that I want the audience to know that it's working within the sin frame. Mine is working way back than the sin actually originated. That's just the idea, so that people don't get confused.
I would even suggest that you're doing even a better favor because both Doc Doc and Spencer, friends of ours, are very careful that they keep within the traditions of Islam. They don't want to walk outside of the traditions. Out, they say out of respect, but that's not what a good translator should do. A translator should go beyond what is respectful to really for the actual earliest text, and you've done that. You've gone back and says, "I'm not here to pander to the Muslims, to pander to translation theory from the 13th century, redacted back to the 7th century. I want to go back to the 7th century." Well done. Thank you for doing that.
Okay, now let's assume that I will give you white sugar, eggs, baking soda, vanilla, and milk. Most probably, you will produce a cake. It could be an amazing cake, like our Christian friends here, Osama Dakdok, Robert Spencer, and Mary Harb, who really believes in the sin. She believes it's history, and she is making her own Quran translation using the sin. Or you can make a horrible cake, and this is by the Muslim translations, especially the sanitized ones after 9/11, since now that Islam should be the religion of peace and so on. So the moral of the story is that you get same ingredients, and very different cakes, but they are cakes still. This is the catch. Now, if I were to give you yeast, flour, oil, pepperoni, and mushrooms, all of a sudden you will get a pizza. And this is the Murad translation. It will be the only pizza because it used different ingredients, not the sin but language, just using the Quran to interpret the Quran, and then this got the different result. In other words, you have the S.I.N Standard Islamic Narrative rendition of the Quran. This will have the Muslim people, even if they made a horrible translation, and the Christian people, even though they tried their best to be faithful to the S.I.N. On the other side, you have the original primitive meaning of the Quran, uh, which would make it comparing apples to oranges, because this will be the only translation which is an apple. My translation.
Okay, so for those who are following this going, basically we're talking about three different stages. We're talking about three different stages here. And this is something that is should be easy for all of us to understand. Anybody that's taken linguistics, I have taken, my wife and I have taken linguistics and translation work. What do? You always go back to the original text. You always take it back to what the author intended. That is proper exegesis. Now, Harb and Spencer and Doc are trying to do that with this Quran that we're using today because they've realized that the Muslims, especially after 9/11, especially after all the turmoil with all the violence that's happening in the world, they've got to go back to these violent texts and sanitize them, make them so they ameliorate so that they are acceptable by the Western psyche and the Western world. And they've been doing that, and they've been taking out any of these problem verses. That is not exegesis. That's called eisegesis. You're imposing a view onto it. That is why Daktok and Spencer and Hobb said, hold on a minute. You can't do that to the Quran or any piece of literature. You've got to go back to what the author intended. But their author are the Standard Islamic Narrative. Their authors, the one they went back to, are the same authors that actually the Muslims go to, and that is the Islamic traditions. Because the Quran is everything we know about the words in the Quran have been given a meaning by those traditions. So that's a second. So now you have the Muslims over here, then you have the Christian translators here, and then you have Murad all by himself. That's why he's over there, lonely over by himself, but a completely different context. And he's the one who's actually, out of all of the translators, he's the one, in my view, this is my view saying, and that's also, he agrees with me, and see if you agree with us. He's the one that's doing what every translator should do. Forget about this transitions, forget about all this overlay that's happened over the century. Go back to the original text, for heaven's sakes. And that's what he's done. The original primitive text, going back to the raw apple. It's not unblemished. It hasn't been eaten out of yet. It is the prime. It is the prime original, the prime narrative. Get back to that narrative. And that's what you're going to see. And that's why, in some ways, this is so unique.
Okay, so I am happy that you said the word unique. What makes my Quran translation unique? This is a question because I'm assuming the audience is asking this.
Folks, have you seen why Murad put that picture up there? That's Neuschwanstein. That is in Germany. It's in southern Germany. It is a what we call a folly. This is a brilliant. It is the only one of its kind. That castle was actually created out of a German. I can't tell you what his position was. I think his name was Ludwig the Second. He created that because he had lots of money and lots of power, and he wanted to waste it. And so he built the most beautiful castle that he could think of. Walt Disney, seeing that castle, modeled it for Tinkerbell's castle. It was the Cinderella's castle. It is the castle you'll see whenever Disney puts up its signature piece. It's that castle. It is the only one of its kind in the world. It is the unique castle that has become the quintessential model of the perfect castle around the world because of Disney since then. So in some ways, what Murad is doing, I think it's great. I don't think in fact, Murad wasn't even aware of just how unique that castle is. But his translation is just like that castle. It goes back to what we think. castles should look like, what castles really were intended to look like. So is this translation.
Excellent stuff. So, my translation, it could be the missing link. Now, people told me, Murad, you have to tell the people why is your product better? I thought better. It is not better. It is the first product to come into existence. It is the first ever Quran translation that ignored the entirety of the S.I.N, Standard Islamic Narrative. This translation will give you the hidden layer of the Quran, which was suppressed mostly by the Abbasids and their sin, and now we know that the Ottomans also played a role. You can say it serves as the missing link between the time of Muhammad, if he existed, till the Abbasid Caliphate. Now, allow me to illustrate. You have here Muhammad, if he existed, Rashidun, which is the four rightly guided caliphs, if they existed, that's why I have them between quotations. The Umayyads, they existed, the Abbasids. Now, all our friends here, they are oranges because they worked with Abbasid material and beyond. This really affected their Quran translation. Now, with my translation, you are getting close to this area. For Muhammad, Rashidun, and Umayyads, if they actually existed and if the Umayyads were anything close to Islam. You see? Do you have anything to say about this?
No, I think that's good. For me, I love timelines. I'm always putting things on timelines. Now, you've put it on timelines here. I would suggest that this even what we have today in all of our translations is not even the Abbasids. I would say almost all of it is Ottomans. It's Ottoman in accretions because we almost don't have anything from the Abbasids from any of the traditions from the Standard Islamic Narrative. We can't find. There is only one document, the Muwatta of Ibn Malik, that comes from the ninth century. That's it. That's the only thing we have from the ninth century. And then the 10th century, 11th century, by going in the 12th century, we have maybe one or two documents, but they all start to proliferate from the Ottoman period. So we're talking about 400 to 500 to 600 years after whoever was the one that actually put the Quran together. We don't think it was Muhammad. I don't think there was ever a Rashidun period, but it's good to see on a timeline so people can see what you're doing. You're not saying Muhammad existed. You're not saying the Rashiduns existed. You are, of course, saying the Umayyads. They are well documented. And if anything, this Quranic material starts to appear during their reign. That is from 661 up until 750. The Abbasids come to power from 750 and they continue up until 1299, up until the end of the 13th century. So that was what you're doing here on a timeline is let's get it back to that Umayyad period. I would not even put Muhammad and Rashidun there because there's nothing from them. They're way down in the what we call the Hijaz. There's not any documentation that far down. There are not even any Jews or Christians that far down to create a Quran that would have had these discussions and these theological doctrinal disputes that the Quran is replete with. So great stuff. On a timeline, it's much more visual this way.
Okay, so here are a list of words or things or concepts that are not found in my Quran translation. So these words are not in my translation. Revelation, book, people of the book, sent down, unseen, disbelievers, infidels, battle of Badr, Yathrib, wife, husband, pair, pigs, swine, abrogation, hell, hellfire, missiles, forbidden, trial, test, good news, crucify, I seek refuge, lawful, unlawful, sedition, private parts, terror, booty, spoils of war, and fight. These words are not in my translation, and surely you have something to say about this.
Well, obviously, take a look at this. I mean, there's so much theological material, doctrinal material, so much material that has to do with politics and certainly with religion and philosophy. All of these categories that you see here are enormously significant when you're talking about what much of the Quran is full of in the translations we see today. These are practical applications like pigs and swine. This is a theological and philosophical problem like abrogation. This is whole indoctrination of hell and hellfire. The whole thing with fighting and crucify and the problem with terror, booty. All this material is very much part and parcel of what we read in the Quran today. The good news, the whole thing to do with crucifixion, that would be theological disputations with Christians. All of that, suddenly you're saying, is not in the Quran. None of these words are in the Quran, which means much of the theological disputes between Christians, Jews, and Muslims just don't exist in the Quran, of the 7th and 8th and 9th century. Fascinating.
Exactly. So now, what will you lose if you do not get my translation? Not getting my Quran translation will cost you a lot of things. One, you will never be able to know the very literal meaning of Quranic words. Two, you will have to succumb to lies in all other Quran translations. And three, you will remain in the cage of the S.I.N, Standard Islamic Narrative, as if you have the sunglasses of the S.I.N all over the Quran. Four, you will never access the pre-Abbasid Caliphate understanding of the Quran. So on one level, I don't want you to miss out. And on another level, I don't want the reader to be fooled. Now, how important is this project for you as a person? This is for the audience listening. Let me ask you, how important is it for you to understand the hidden layer of the Quran and get closer to cracking the code of Islam? How important is it for you in general to spread such truth all over the internet? These are the questions I'm asking the people. And also, this is a fun fact that this is the first ever ex-Muslim translation of the Quran. And if people think that that's cool, then please like this video.
Okay, I think you have said it perfectly. I don't think I need to add anything more to that. This is probably the first time, and of course, you have told me this, so it's not the first time I'm hearing it, but it's the first time for many people who have been following you to realize just how important this Quranic translation is. Not only is it because it's somebody who has come out of Islam, who understands the harm that Islam has done to the text itself over your whole lifetime, but also it's the first time that anybody has dared to do what you have done, to take it back to its original philosophy, going back down to the context of that period. All the more reason why we need to hit and like that button.
So now I will showcase 4 products for the people. Just to be clear, my translation is digital only. There is no physical copy. So first we have an English only version. So this will be a PDF, and this is how it looks like. And also a Kindle, and this is how it looks like. Also, we have an Arabic plus English version, PDF, it looks like this, and Kindle, and it looks like this. So you have a total of 4 products. The offers. There are 2 offers, one with a very low price and one with a high price. Who is the light version for? This is the low price. This one is for the casual viewers. These are the silent majority, those who never comment on our videos, but they are always there. The price is equal to 2 of your regular coffees. So this is one product, complete English only version PDF, but it has some limitations. Now, the limitations are that it has this copyright here, and it cannot be printed, and it cannot be highlighted. So this offer is also limited to 1,000 people, meaning once it's out, it's out. So hurry up if you would like to get this version. Now, who is the complete package for? This one is for the warriors who believe in the cause. This one is not for the casual viewers, because people, you will be funding much bigger projects which you never thought possible. That's why it's a bit more expensive, so that you be getting the product, but also supporting me. That's the covenant I will be having with you. This is the audience. So you
Okay.
will get the entirety, the four products as a package. Yes, sir.
Okay. You see them there. Now, but these are so important because you have, I would go if you are a serious student, and that's why I wish maybe next time put students up there or scholars up there. If you are a serious student, go for the one on the right because then you have both the Arabic and the English back together. I always tell people whenever you buy the Quran, make sure you have a green English and Arabic, because so much of what we're now finding in the Quran, Muslims have never really even read it to understand it. They read it to memorize it in a language they don't even understand. This way, you're going to unpack it, but you can see the Arabic from which it comes. So when people dispute with you, you can say it's right there in the Arabic. Look in the Arabic, but get the right translation. Make sure you get the right meaning of the words that are there.
Yeah, so this is just for people not to get confused. You have the light version, which will be the English only PDF, and you will not get all of this. But with the complete package, you will get the English and the Arabic, PDF and Kindle. Plus, you can print some of it and you can highlight it. And also, there is a digital certificate that I have created for people who get this package. This is for the serious students, as you say, Dr. Smith, and people, they have the choice. They could choose this or that.
All right. So you do you have a price for this yet, or do we have a price or not?
Yes. So the complete package, this is $50, and the other one is 15.
$15, that's US dollars, or $50, that's US dollars. 15 versus 50. Now, do people get receipts when they pay for this?
They get to they get through the website. Yes.
It'll come back and say you have paid for this.
Yeah.
Okay, because many people they will be want to know that because they will also be using this in their ministry. Those who will be using this for professional reasons, they'll need to get reimbursed. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah. Yeah. They will get from the website. Okay. So how to download the Murad translation? The link will be in the description box. It's this Buy Me a Coffee link. This is the website that I host this product on. There is no registration required and no credit card fees. I take care of that for you. So, credit card, Visa, and MasterCard, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all of this is valid. And also, local currency is available. So, not just the US dollar. And the whole thing takes like 4 seconds to complete. Me and my friend, we tested it at Buy Me a Coffee. Plus, you can easily do it by your phone, so you do not need a laptop or a desktop. You could just download right away. And also, people who are on Patreon, it's there on Patreon if they prefer that. And again, this is the last question: do we need another translation? Well, let me ask you: do you actually have a Quran translation? What you have is a mere shadow of it. You see on the left, you have the Mona Lisa. It is like calling this the Mona Lisa. Do we need another translation? Yes, because you do not have one. Actually, you don't have one. You just have the S.I.N, how the S.I.N views the Quran. This is not a translation. And by the way, if you know of any Quran translation that is ultra literal and has no brackets and is based on linguistics and not on the S.I.N, then you don't need my translation. But if you do not know of any, then back to square one. You have the light version, you have the complete package. You choose what fits you best and get the Murad translation now. And back to you now, Dr. Smith.
Okay, I love that last picture. Your symbolism is brilliant with the Mona Lisa and the bee, the Mona Lisa's face, even looking the wrong direction. God bless you, Murad. Yeah, this is terrific. You're doing us all a great favor. How many years has it taken you to do this translation?
It's close to five, 4 years making the concordance, and just a few months making the translation itself from the concordance which I have created from scratch.
Is the concordance built into the translation?
Yes, but the concordance itself is not for sale.
Oh, okay. All right. At some point, are you going to make it available?
Maybe, but with a future Quran translation, if it included the Arabic and the Aramaic and be made in a more professional manner.
Okay.
But right now, this is made in an amateur manner that only I can understand it.
And we will probably publish it for you when it gets up and running. But listen, did you hear him say Aramaic? See, here what Murad has done, he has gone back to what we now know from what the Arabic was in the 7th and 8th century. He's going back to the original Arabic. But he's also introduced another whole nother category. And that is the rasm that's there. The rasm that's there came from other languages, which have other meanings for those same words. See, there were quite a few languages that shared the same alphabet. Aramaic, Syro-Aramaic, Nabatean Aramaic. We have Syriac. We also have Hebrew. They all were using the same alphabet. They are all using many of the same words, but with different meanings. And as we're finding, much of the Quran has been borrowed from these sources. There's also Ethiopic sources. There's also, goodness, there's Zoroastrian sources. There's even some Chinese sources in the Quran in order to go back and find out what every one of these source meanings were, that's a whole nother stage. It will take years to do. And they will have to be done by people who understand Syriac and Syro-Aramaic and Hebrew and also Ethiopic. All we're interested in this translation is going back to the original Arabic because it is a final copy of the Quran is written in Arabic. No one disputes that. Therefore, we need to find out what the original people who collated, brought it together from those languages, what they intended when they wrote it to begin with. So this has been great. This has been exciting. Thanks so much, Murad. You've done an awful lot of work in here, and we want to make sure that we give you credit for that. And I would suggest as many people as possible. In fact, why don't all of you who are watching this just hit that button, the one on the right, and go and buy Murad a coffee for heaven's sakes, and get this translation so you have it in your own library so that you can use it to know really what the Quran is saying. God bless you, Murad. Thanks for coming on board. It's great to realize that we can now buy this and actually start using in our own studies.
Thank you for having me once again, Dr. Smith, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So, Murad and Jay, thousands of miles apart. God bless you. Over and out.